Hi, my name is Angie McCarty, and I serve as one of the pastors here at Church of the Resurrection.
And I'm Robert Johnson, the location pastor here at the Leawood location.
Welcome to Resurrection Stories, a podcast about hope, purpose, transformation, and service. Each week, you'll hear from a guest connected to Church of the Resurrection who is living out their faith in inspiring ways. Our hope is to expose our congregation and the Kansas City area to some of the amazing people who make up our church in a way that inspires you to live out your faith and make a positive impact in our community. As you listen to today's conversation, I invite you to share this podcast with others. You can do that by going to core.org/stories. Now let's welcome our guest for today's episode. Our guest today is Isaac Cates, who serves with our worship ministry as the director of music outreach. I cannot wait for you to hear Isaac's story. He is a Kansas City native, Grammy-nominated artist, composer, director, just an incredible human being whose story is God-inspired. Let's get started. Isaac, would you just sing us in? Just sing something to start.
Sure. I love you, Lord, and I lift my voice to worship you, oh my soul, rejoice. Take joy, my King, in what you hear. Let it be a sweet, sweet sound in your ear.
Wow.
That's a wrap. We don't need any more.
You're in. You make the cut.
Goodness.
You make the cut. You're in.
Yeah.
You don't need to come for a second try. You're in. You're in.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Isaac, it's a pleasure to have you on. As this is our third season of this podcast, Resurrection Stories, and we've been waiting to get you on. So Thank you for coming on. We know you're so busy. You're traveling all over the place. Mm-hmm. So this wasn't on the script, even as we just discussed it just a few minutes ago. But I just I want to take a quick moment so folks can get a fuller scope and just talk about some of the things you do outside of Resurrection before we come to discuss what you do at Resurrection. For example, I know you're on the team of people who actually vote to determine who gets nominated for.
Yes. I'm a part of the Recording Academy. I've been now 3 years.
That's amazing.
Voted in 2 official Grammys.
Wow.
And I've been had a project that was consideration for nomination as well. My last project in 2022, wow. And it's fun. It's a great collaboration and collective of musicians, and it's a great honor because you have to be invited. And the only way you can be a voting member is you either have already been on a Grammy Award-winning project, or you have to go through the process of they vet you, and you have to have 10 releases in the last decade or whatever. It's some criteria that you have to meet, and then you have to be invited by people who are already members, voting members. So it's a great honor to do it, and the responsibility too. I mean, I take it seriously, but it's a great opportunity too to learn about so many great artists.
Of course.
My musical taste is so vast, so it's really cool. I'm very honored to do it. Yeah.
And you've done. I know of 2 films, maybe more.
Yeah, specifically, I've actually done some composition for some films as a composer, and most recently, I was the narrator for I'm So Glad. Specifically, it's called, the whole song is I'm So Glad Troubles Don't Last Always, and it's the first comprehensive documentary on the history of spiritual singing and gospel music in Kansas City, and which of course we premiered right here at Resurrection, and I was the narrator, and then I'm featured in it, and it's an amazing, Paul Winsky and his team did an amazing job of curating all that. He spent 14 years compiling all this information. It is, people will write dissertations about it, books will be, I mean, he has unearthed some beautiful things in that documentary. And so, yeah, we debuted, and now it's sort of making its round at different film festivals, and it's being shown around Kansas City. But it premiered here at Resurrection in February of 2023.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's amazing.
And you've actually had, I know that there was a PhD student
Yes.
who actually did a dissertation on your music.
Yes. You know what's interesting is
What?
Yeah, that kind of, I have actually been involved with about four or five musicologists or music students or composers or whatever who are doing graduate studies. Another friend of mine did his PhD on, I think I want to say the maturation or matriculation of gospel, of spiritual piano, gospel piano. And so he interviewed all of these amazing pianists, and they thought well enough of me to include me in the number. That was a couple years ago. His name is Dr. Rod Vester. And then this young man, Brian Black, he's a student at University of South Carolina. He's pursuing his Doctor of Musical Arts. I think it's specifically in choral conducting, but his dissertation is on basically the influence of gospel music, classical musicians who have a Eurocentric style. And I'm messing up the name of it because it's got a very specific name, as you guys know. But yeah, he delved deeply into my writing, my songwriting, and my composition, along with Dr. Diane White Clayton. She's amazing, and another friend of mine, Dr. Raymond Wise. And I'm honored to be. I'm like the baby amongst it. They are very high up. Dr. Raymond Wise has basically written a lot of the pedagogical approach to how you can teach gospel music in an academic setting, and so it's really cool. I feel really honored.
And I'm not surprised about the level of talent and that you have done all of these things. What surprises me most is that as I know you here at Resurrection, you have the most humble spirit.
He never talks about that.
Never talks about that stuff. And when you kind of branch into that a tiny bit, you are always giving glory to God.
Oh, absolutely.
As the one who is the source of all of this.
That is, you totally, Angie, that is my thing with that.
Yep.
And you know what? Resurrection's got so many gifted people. I'm honored to be from Kansas City, and I believe we're one of the most slept on cities in the world. People know now,
Yes.
They're finding out, but it's a wonderful place. I think there's sort of an inherent humility sort of that goes through us, you know what I mean? And we talk about this also in the documentary, and that it's the blessing and the curse. It's the blessing of, because there's really not an industry per se for musicians outside of, the classical realm. Some of what I do, God has just sort of made a way. There was no template that was before me. And so we do it from our hearts because we're not doing it for the money, and so there's so much, and that has a lot to do. I think I kind of carry a lot of that same thing. And then I just don't, I never think it's not, some of the stuff I do, I don't think I think I have an interesting life and feel blessed, but I don't think it's of interest to people. So I don't bring it up a lot. I love serving and just,
Well, we appreciate your humility. I will mention that Linda and I attended a concert where you wrote. It was amazing, where you were part of working with one of the local universities, and there was a blending of African American gospel music with Eastern Orthodox music tradition.
Wow.
Exactly. It was amazing.
You're talking about the canon, and thank you so much. I appreciate you guys also for being there. And there were several other Res family there.
Lots of Resurrection.
Yeah, Resurrection. I love Resurrection.
I love Resurrection.
Resurrection.
I love this.
It's awesome.
Yes.
They have been so kind and so sweet to me. And Canon for Racial Reconciliation is what he's talking about, and it's a piece. It is the largest choral piece that I have composed ever in my career, and it took us about 3 years. It was commissioned by William Jewell College, and exactly what you named it right. It's the melding of Eastern Orthodox choral tradition and really not just gospel, but Black musical idioms, styles together, that we melded the two together. The text was written by a lady by the name of Dr. Carla Thomas. And she's a Black Orthodox, she's a minister, I think, as well. And she wrote this text 20 years ago. And basically, there is a small kind of organization within Orthodoxy called, I think I don't want to mess it up. Is it Moses the Black? I think it's the Order of Moses the Black or something like that. And it's basically some Black Orthodox people. And she wrote this text to deal with the disparages that she's faced as a African American woman, and the racism, and she wrote it using their liturgical elements. You know what I mean? And which I knew nothing about. Even in college, only thing we all know the Rachmaninoff Vespers and all night vigil and stuff that are pretty popular, but I didn't know much about that tradition. I don't think it's a very small part of America. And so I had to delve really far in there with my colleague, Dr. Nick Reeves. He's like an expert in that tradition. And we spent like maybe the first 6 months just talking back and forth and reading material. And he said, read this book. I said, okay, read that one. And he had to learn about the Black musical traditions. And I had to learn about orthodoxy. And then the last piece of it is that to make it full circle reconciliatory, we highlighted the work of an African-American composer by the name of Eva Jesse, who was not very well known now, her works and her music, but she was an absolute all-star. I mean, she was big in the during the Harlem Renaissance. She was originally from, I think, either Cherryville, Kansas, and she went to Western College University, which was one of the oldest historically Black colleges, which is gone now, but it was in the can. It had notable people there, Black African Americans, specifically women, and their music department was world renowned. Wow. She went on to be the person who started her own chorus, and she was a boss. She debuted Porgy and Bess. Her choir debuted Porgy and Bess for Gershwin, and historically they sung at the March on Washington as well. And so anyway, her works would cover it up because she was a Black woman. You all know the deal. And thank God now that people are starting to unearth some of the things that were covered up. And she was one person we wanted to highlight because she was from right here. And so we used some of her melodic motifs and kind of put it all in the oven and the blender together.
So I'm assuming that's on recording. Can folks find that on YouTube somewhere?
You know what? They can find video clips of our rehearsals, little excerpts. The whole thing was recorded for archival purposes. Okay. There may be an opportunity, I can say it here for the very first time, but I can't say what, but there may be an opportunity that it will come up that we get a chance to perform it one more time this year. It premiered here.
At Resurrection. Right.
Actually, maybe in the future, possibly, definitely
at Resurrection,
maybe in New York, but that's all I can say. Okay. And you guys get that's an inside scoop. But I don't want to say more because I can't contractually. But everything else, it was a wonderful night, and we premiered that with 75 singers. It's for double choir, and William Jewell was so kind. I did a residency there, and Dr. Maglione is over choral music studies, and I have a great relationship there with them.
Well, it was an amazing night.
Yeah, it was great.
And the audience was so diverse. You had a bunch of Resurrection folks there. You had folks from the African American church there, predominantly African American church. I was sitting right in front of a whole row of folks from the Eastern Orthodox.
Yes, with all that
garb on, but then in these moments, both whether we were doing Eastern Orthodox or doing Black gospel, everyone, there was such a unity. It was so beautiful.
It was amazing. It really was.
Isaac, tell us, what do you do at how long have you been at Resurrection? What do you do? How did you, just very briefly, because we want to get to your story. That's what we want to let folks hear your story.
Absolutely. My time at Resurrection is so interesting because I've actually had a connection to Resurrection well over a decade. And most people don't know that. I first started coming to Resurrection when Resurrection was hosting the National Worship Leader Conference. That was when I would come, and it was incredible because worship leaders from all around Kansas City would come, and I was given a registration by, at the time, Lance Winkler, who was working here, was a friend of mine, and I had actually already known Justin Huey actually when he was downtown. Okay. So I actually have a relationship people don't know about. So I've always kind of, and Kevin Rogers is a dear friend of mine. He's played on my album. So there's always been like a relationship. And I actually was in the Sanctuary, which is now the Foundry, when Pastor Adam first rolled out, I would come to the Bible studies. I was so inspired by his teaching, not to come lead worship or do anything. I just came, and I remember he gave out, I think, denarii and everything, and he rolled out all these plans, and I was awestruck because I had never seen anything like that. Fast forward, I think we sung at one of the Wednesday night services with my group, and I just had this relationship, for some years. So they knew me. Kevin Rogers reached out to me about coming to sing a song leading during the pandemic. So 2019, pandemic. Fast forward to 2020, I think they started, we were recording online and things of that nature. And they called me in to sing one song, lead one song. And he said, Kevin reached out and said, "Are you available?" And I was like, "Yeah, I ain't doing nothing. I'm at home like every other musician on the planet right now." So usually I travel and stuff. So I came and did that. And then they kept calling every other week, "Well, would you come?" And I was like, "Okay." And so that was how it just kind of, there was already a relationship. It was a very natural thing to do. And so fast forward to 2020, I think I even started coming at maybe even it was at the end of 2019. It was sort of intermittent. But definitely 2020, I came on full-time here as the director of music outreach. And initially, I was the associate director of traditional music. And then we had the idea to expand my role to where I got a chance to live into more of the things that I do musically, which is, multiple genres, but also get a chance to bring people together with community engagement. Yeah. And so, I've been serving in that role now I'm working on year 4. Yeah.
That's incredible. So take us back to the beginning of you.
Yeah.
And share with us your story and how you got from there to here and everything in between.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I never think of myself as really having a uniquely interesting story. I think it's becoming more interesting now. I mean, I can honestly say that I feel blessed to have my story. I was born and raised here in Kansas City, Wyandotte County, and my mother, Glenda Cates, my father, Herb Cates. My mother was from Arkansas, little rural town, southern part of Arkansas. She was a piano player, could play a little bit, could sing a little bit as well, but she was also an educator, but she got a degree in education, but she worked in Social Security Administration. So her only ever student was me. And then my grandmother, my father's mother, she was an educator and a librarian. And on the Cates side, it's all of these historically significant Black people. My grandfather was the president of the NAACP for the Kansas chapter, was friends with Martin Luther King. His sister they had a wing named after her at KU, all that stuff. Wow. So they came together. They had me. They met at University of Pine Bluff, and they had me. I was born in 1985, and I was just a regular kid. I feel like, I came in, I had a great household where the parents were together. I was an only child. I wanted siblings terribly, but didn't have them. And come to find out years later that they did have one child. My father, had one son who only lived for about, I think, a month, and then passed away. And so, but I was raised the only child, Kansas City, and I was like a Renaissance kid. I loved everything. I loved sports. I could draw. I loved public speaking. I loved music, and I had a talent for kind of all the little things or whatever. And so then I was raised in a Christian household, and but we weren't like super Christian. It wasn't one of those things. We would my mother made us go to church. At the time, my father was at a weird place in his relationship with Christ, so he would kind of go sometimes. And then God would kind of eventually work on him later, and he became like active in the church and a trustee and things of that nature. So, I grew up in Wyandotte County doing that and matriculated at the USD 500 school, and I started piano lessons at the age of 4. My mother made me do it, and man, I hated it. Loved music, but just hated the idea of the structural element of it. I always read music really well, which is interesting. I could always read music really well, even though my comprehensive thing was pretty sharp. My ear didn't develop till I was maybe about 8 or 9. But as a result, I was just bored out of my mind with music. I was like, man, I want to be outside playing and like breaking stuff and doing all the stuff that and that was the contingency. My mother was like, yeah, you can do that, but you got to work on your Hannah and your Cherney and work on your scales and stuff, do your thing, and then you can go. Her mother was also, my grandmother was a piano player as well too. So it's kind of like, so I played in church, and I never played like little things, like when you start off with little, minuets and things. I've always had long fingers and with a big dude, and so they jumped right in there. My comprehension went quickly, so I didn't ever start playing for the children's choir. I was playing for like the mass choir, the adult choir, at like 7 or something like that. Wow. And so it's really interesting. And then I started singing probably around age, maybe, I sang in kindergarten. I remember one of my first, I remember the duet that they had made, my son with a friend. People will say we're in love. Me and Janelle Bully, son, not Bully, Janelle, I forgot her last name, Janelle. If she sees this, she'll remember we sung this at Kitty College. And so, I was singing and
from
playing.
from Oklahoma.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, Oklahoma, exactly. We did. Yes. Oh God. So we did. Then I was singing in church, and just a regular kid. At one point, I played a little football, and music was a passion of mine. But it really started off as just a hobby. It started off as something I was interested in because I had so many other interests. I really, I said by the time I was like 13, I wrote my first song. Called God's Grace, which is interesting. Like, I'm too young to even know anything about that yet, but I wrote it. It wasn't that great, but I wrote, that's my first Christian song. It was the first song actually I ever wrote in general. And by then I matriculated pretty far with musical studies, and I'd done stuff in school and the solos and that kind of thing, recitals. And I just thought music was going to be something that was in my life, but I was very interested in science, and specifically biology and anatomy. I actually wanted to be an ophthalmologist. That's what many people do not know that. My parents was like, do it. My dad was like, yeah, man, son, you can do. And when he found out that I wanted to, God was saying something else with me with regards to music, I knew by the time I was age, maybe even 15, that maybe even before that this was it. The music is going to be it, because I had opportunities. I never worked a regular job. I've always, but the first time I got paid to do anything in life outside of allowance, was to play at my church. At age 14, they were kind enough to give me $100 or something like that to do that, and I never did it for the money. And I was like, "You can get paid to do this?" And I was like, and my dad was like, "No, son, don't." no,
we're creating a month.
Exactly.
He's
He's like, don't do that. You follow your ophthalmology. We have some doctors and physicians in our family, and you're smart. You can do that. And I'm like, oh no, Dad. I'm starting to really feel. And I'll never forget him saying to me, I had stopped taking piano lessons for about not even a year, maybe 8 months, because I complained about it. And when I started back up again, I begged my parents. Literally, I begged them to let me stop. My mother had lupus, and she got sick, and my dad, being the wonderful dad that as dads are, was like, I ain't gonna listen to you complain about this anymore. You can be done with piano. Then mom got well. She had a flare up, and she was in the hospital, and then she got better. And she said, I heard you stop piano. I said, yeah. And I said, I'm good. As kids do, changed my mind. This is probably age 7 or 8, so we're going back. And I said, I want to take piano again. And they both were like, Mom was like, okay. My dad sat me down and said, listen to me. If you do this, you are going to commit to this. And not only will you commit to this, Mom said, you're going to do it for the Lord. And my dad said, you will be one of the best at it.
Wow.
He said, you will not, I can't say the words he actually said, but you will not half blank this. You will do this all the way. And you're not going to be, and you're going to use all your skill set. You're not going to just read music. You're not going to just play it by ear. You're going to do both, and you're going to do it. And he was like, and you better be serious about it. And I never stopped after that. And then but he thought it was just, I'm serious, not as a career path, serious. He gave me that talk to say, son, do something, commit to it, put some skin in the game. He didn't know that speech that he gave me inspired me to say, okay, Daddy said I better do this. Yeah. So then I went through the door, and it became a calling for me, and I decided to realize it was going to be a career path.
Wow. I
went on then to study music at the Conservatory of Music, and I started there. While I was there, I started arranging music, and I started my group Ordained, and recorded albums, and the rest is history.
Wow. Wow. What a great story. Yeah. So, and so we're almost out of time. Mm-hmm. We are out of time, but I want to get this final question in. So the affirmations concert you do here. By the way, folks, if you just put it on your calendar, September every year, latter part of September, we do the affirmations concert, and it is a gathering of the best singers, instrumentalists, worship leaders, choir leaders from across the greater KC area. Yep. They're here, and Resurrection Sanctuary is packed out, and it is an amazing experience. Mm-hmm. One of the things that when people come is that we get a chance to, you lead the concert, and so your passion for the Lord it's so clear and so visible in that. You want to say just a little bit about so your parents are guiding you there. You all are church folks, not overly Christian, as you say, but connected. What was the turning point? Like, where you like it became real for you personally?
Yeah, I was 13 years old. I will never forget it. I grew up at Metropolitan Baptist Temple on the Kansas side, and I didn't tell my parents anything. It'd been on my mind maybe the last couple months. We have different churches sometimes call it appeal. Some churches call it invitation. The doors of the church are open, whatever it is, after the sermon, where you give your life to Christ. And I had been like feeling something. I mean, literally for months. And I'll never forget my pastor. He's passed away now, Pastor Earl Bainham. He just turned to the congregation and he said, "I just want you guys to know that God loves you." And I swear at the time, it felt like there was just me and him talking, and it was not him. Wow. It felt like the Lord saying, "Yep, you, I'm talking to you, Isaac." Wow. I didn't talk to my parents about it. They had no idea. I just got up and went down. Wow. While the choir was singing, I don't know what they were singing, "I Surrender All," maybe. And I just went down, and that was the beginning of it. And I knew that God loved me beyond anything I could fathom, anything. And it had nothing to do with my parents. Right. They introduced me to the Lord. Right. It had nothing to do with external. It was literally, and ever since then, it's been just me and God. My relationship has grown in Him. And ironically, that's the same time that I started writing music as well. Because the synergy of that came together. So, yeah.
That's beautiful.
And so much of your music just emanates God's love. Yeah. We hear you sing or play, and God's love is prominent.
Yes. I mean, that's the one thing I want everyone to know. I mean, literally, the gospel of Jesus is a love story. It's the greatest. Story. You know what I mean? And that's one of the reasons why I just love resurrection, because we focus on that. Yeah. It's not condemnation or all these other things, the human things that we're going to deal with along the way, not mysterious things that aren't true. Stuff. You know what I mean? But just the reality. And I'm fighting back tears now because I think of the love of God, and I am just so grateful that we're recipients, that God thinks enough of me to consider me. And I'm not always, we were not perfect, right? I don't always tell him thank you. I'm not always nice. I don't always feel like it. And I don't even always acknowledge him like I should, but he's always there. Yeah. So that love, it's been the same. And I'm growing. I've lost, unfortunately, both of my parents. My mother passed away in 2011 to systemic lupus. And my father passed away last year, 2023, on July 2nd. Honestly, depression. He had ulcerative colitis and some other things, but he just sort of gave up, but to see that he's now with the Lord and to know that he's out of his misery, is a beautiful thing. So I'm grateful. God knew that I could do this now at this moment in life. Yeah. So
I love it. The love of God gripped you at age 13. Yeah. We were in this past weekend at the traditional services. We did the hymn, "Oh Love That Will Not Let Me Go."
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. Which I had never sung before, actually. I knew the words of it. Yeah. And I had used the words in sermons. And we were standing there, and at the end of the 7:30 service, we got to the part and it said, "Oh, love that," and it was over. It was too much.
Oh yeah, my pastor used to love. He would do love hymns. We'd have to do a whole month of that, and "Love That Would Never Let Me Go," "Love Divine," or "Love Excelling." We would do "Love Lifted Me." The Baptist Church really loves that one. So it's. I love that we're focusing on that. That wasn't even planned for us to talk about that, but yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
Isaac, we cannot thank you enough for being here and sharing your story. We can't thank you enough for just the presence of God that you bring to worship here at Resurrection, and really that you bring all over the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
thank you for letting me come. Absolutely.
Yeah. You were awesome.
Appreciate it. Thank you for letting me talk and share my story.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you so much for being with us today, for listening to this story, this podcast. We pray that it enriches your life and your spirit. Now that you found this podcast, we hope that you will share it with your friends, that you'll find it on our website and share it with others. You can always direct people to core.org/stories to find this and many more stories that will lift your spirit. Thanks so much for joining us.